The History of the Broadway Musical, Part 2. Table of Contents.
For clickable links to the videos, go to the description, show more, below, and right-click on the playlist to open link in new tab.
Then from the playlist, select the required video. These lists are scrollable.
The early musicals, from about 1900 to 1927, were usually two-act shows. The first act presented a problem, such as a broken romance in the second act. The problem was resolved.
The acts had opening and closing musical numbers, and the closing numbers usually involved the whole cast filling the stage.
Operettas.
Operettas flourished in the 19th century as in the case of Gilbert and Sullivan's operettas such as the HMS Pinafore, the Pirates of Penzance, and the Mikado.
Examples of operettas are the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas in the late 1800s that were very popular in Britain, as well as in the United States are the Pirates of Penzance,
The Mikado,
and the HMS Pinafore.
Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore had its American premiere in 1878, and was an instant success. Within a year more than 90 HMS Pinafore companies were touring the U.S.
The success of the show influenced the beginning of musical theater in New York as a large-scale business.
After the middle 1860s, and for the rest of that century, the American stage was literally flooded with foreign operettas.
In the late 1890s, the British showman and entrepreneur George Edwards brought his London Gaiety Girls to New York City. He called his production musical comedy to distinguish it from his previous burlesques.
Much of American popular music of the first decades of the 20th century was written by European immigrants, such as Victor Herbert, Rudolf Frimmel, and Sigmund Romberg.
They were all classically trained in Europe and brought a form of operetta to the United States that was, in every sense, the source for musical comedy. It was sentimental and melodious, and established a tradition of the play based on musical numbers and songs.
Among the noted operettas was Victor Herbert's Babes in Toyland, 1903, and Naughty Marietta, 1910.
Here's a postage stamp honoring Victor Herbert.
This is one of Victor Herbert's most famous operettas, Naughty Marietta.
Naughty Marietta was made into a movie in 1935, starring Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy.
Here is a clip from Naughty Marietta, with Jeanette MacDonald singing "Aw Sweet Mystery of Life."
To view this video, select number 12 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
Next, we will see a clip of Jeanette MacDonald singing Italian Street Song.
To view this video, select number 13 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
Sigmund Romberg's works, such as The Student Prince, 1924, and The Desert Song, 1926, were also made into successful motion pictures.
We will now see an excerpt from The Student Prince.
Drink, 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 or The Drinking Song, is from the movie The Student Prince, sung by Mario Alonso. The movie starred in Blythe and Edmund Purdom, with songs sung by Mario Alonso.
To view this video, select number 14 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
One of Rudolf Frimmel's most famous operettas was The Vagabond King.
Franz Lehar's The Merry Widow, in 1907, was a very successful operetta.
This is Franz Lehar.
The basic components of story, song, and dance were present in musicals from the beginning until the late 1920s. The emphasis was on song and dance.
Plots were kept simple: boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. This easygoing plot with its happy ending provided the skeleton that was fleshed out with songs, chorus lines, and solo dance routines.
An example of this is Florodora, a British production at the Casino Theatre. It is a play about romance and perfume on an island in the Philippines. Had a bevy of lovely ladies twirling parasols, and a string of gallant gentlemen in morning suits singing, "Tell Me Pretty Maiden," to them.
We will now have an excerpt of Tell Me Pretty Maiden, from the musical Florodora.
To view this video, select number 15 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
The song, the play, and the girls all became instant favorites. Florodora was a huge hit. The show ran for 553 performances, and was revived many times.
All 6 of the pretty maidens became the wives of millionaires within a very few years.
Although not an original cast member, 16-year-old Evelyn Nesbit, the infamous girl on a swing, became a Florodora girl. She went on to greater fame in 1906, when her jealous husband shot and killed architect Stanford White, her unfortunate lover.
Vaudeville.
Vaudeville was a series of acts presented by comics, singers, acrobats, and other performers.
Here is an advertisement for a vaudeville show.
Vaudeville comedians Joseph Weber and Lou Fields turned their act into a popular series of Broadway musicals and revues. Fields saw his children, Herb, Dorothy, and Joseph, succeed as lyricists and librettists in musical theater and film.
A favorite vaudeville song of the period was "Ta-ra-ra Boom Da," dating from 1891.
We will now have a short clip of the song, "Ta-ra-ra Boom Da."
To view this video, select number 16 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
Talking motion pictures, beginning in 1927, became vaudeville's kiss of death, and the replacement for low-priced mass entertainment.
Still, vaudeville was extremely popular entertainment, and its growth ran parallel to that of Broadway plays and musicals in the 1920s and 30s. Al Jolson, in The Jazz Singer, was the first motion picture with synchronized sound.
George M. Cohan was a major figure in the development of the Broadway musical. The settings, characters, dialogues, lyrics, and melodies of Cohan's musicals were thoroughly American.
The spirit of brashness, cocksureness, energy, and patriotism that pervaded the Cohan musicals were also unmistakably American.
George M. Cohan ushered in the heyday of musical comedy with his productions. They introduced such memorable songs as "You're a Grand Old Flag," "Give My Regards to Broadway,"
and "Over There."
Over There was a very popular song of the World War I era.
This is George M. Cohan.
This is George M. Cohan and Family.
George M. Cohan and Family.
A famous saying by George M. Cohan is, "My mother thanks you. My father thanks you. My sister thanks you. And I thank you."
In 1904, Cohan authored a musical called Little Johnny Jones. After 3 attempts, it was a failure. Still, he persevered, took the show on tour, and reworked it several times, before returning it to Broadway.
Little Johnny Jones opened on Broadway at the Liberty Theater in 1904.
This time it was well received. It is the story of an American jockey accused of misdeeds in England. The song, Yankee Doodle Boy, is from the musical Little Johnny Jones.
We will now have a clip of the song, Yankee Doodle Boy, from the musical Little Johnny Jones.
To view this video, select number 17 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
Little Johnny Jones introduced two hit songs. The first was, I'm a Yankee Doodle Boy, and the second song was called, Give My Regards to Broadway.
Along with Irving Berlin's 1940s song, There's No Business Like Show Business, from Annie Get Your Gun, Give My Regards to Broadway, is considered one of the two national anthems of the Broadway Theater.
In 1943, a movie about the life of George M. Cohan was released.
This is from the movie story of George M. Cohan.
More from the movie story of George M. Cohan.
This is George M. Cohan.
This is George M. Cohan.
This is George M. Cohan. In I'd Rather Be Right.
Cohan established some of the principles that were to govern musical comedy writing. Any plot, however far-fetched and improbable, was useful as long as it could be the basis for the songs, dances, routines, and comedy episodes.
The book was subservient to these elements within the play. For many years afterwards, American musical comedy was governed by these principles.
Cohan's next show, in 1906, was called 45 Minutes from Broadway. The score had some standards that are still sung today. Most notably, Mary is a Grand Old Name.
We will now have a clip of Mary is a Grand Old Name, from the musical 45 Minutes from Broadway.
To view this video, select number 18 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
In 1909, Cohan opened another hit called The Man Who Owns Broadway, and indeed he did.
This is Looking North from 33rd Street.
In 1911, Cohan built his own theater, Cohan's Theater, on the corner of Broadway and 43rd Street.
Oh You Beautiful Doll is from 1911.
Cohan was brash, arrogant, and confident in his own talent in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. He wrote and starred in hit after hit.
In 1917, Cohan produced Over There.
From Little Johnny Jones in 1904 to the 1920s, George M. Cohan, as an actor, singer, dancer, writer, director, and manager, truly owned Broadway. There is a statue of Cohan in Times Square.
Here is a postage stamp honoring George M. Cohan.
Revues have their roots in variety, vaudeville, and music halls.
Besides the growing popularity of the operetta in Broadway's repertoire, the other notable musical event of the 1900s occurred in 1907, as The Follies of 1907.
The Follies of 1907 was produced by Florin Ziegfeld. While it was not the first revue on Broadway, it was certainly the most lavish ever to be produced.
From 1907 the Ziegfeld Follies were produced every year until Ziegfeld's death in 1932.
The Ziegfeld Follies then continued intermittently until 1957.
This is from the Ziegfeld Follies of 1907.
Others tried to imitate the Ziegfeld Follies, as they later became known in 1911, but none were as spectacular, or nearly as successful.
These shows glorified the American girl with huge musical production numbers. Half of the budget of the Ziegfeld Follies went to gorgeous costumes. Comic sketches and other variety acts balanced the program.
We will next have a clip Introduction to the Ziegfeld Follies, from the PBS documentary, Broadway, the American Musical.
To view this video, select number 19 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
The Ziegfeld Follies. Notice on the marquee the names of Bob Hope and Fanny Brice.
This is the Ziegfeld Follies with Mandy in 1919.
This is the Ziegfeld Follies of 1924 and 1925.
This is the Follies and Florence Ziegfeld.
Florence Ziegfeld was the impresario extraordinaire.
This is Florence Ziegfeld.
Fanny Brice was signed by Ziegfeld in 1910. We will now see a clip of Fanny Brice singing "Cooking Breakfast for the Man I Love" from the 1930 movie Be Yourself.
To view this video, select number 20 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
In the present day, the tradition of the musical revue is still alive, especially in Las Vegas, as in Bally's Jubilee,
and the production shows on cruise ships.
Up until the late 1920s, the Broadway musical was rarely based on a text or book that was thought to be suitable. The usual practice was for a producer to have a star, or a group of stars, under contract and then develop a play that would highlight the special talent of a performer or performers.
The important thing in the early musicals was the kind of routine or part that was assigned to the stars. And it did not matter at all if much of this was relevant to the story.
A pattern was evolved which for a long time was adhered to inflexibly. Beginning with the rise of the curtain, a line or two of fetching chorus girls chanted an opening number. Mammoth production sequences ended each of the acts. The girl always captured the boy, and the villain always met his just due.
Within such a rigid formula, however, some creative figures were able to bring some distinction and personality of style. There were composers like Frimmel, Romberg, Victor Herbert, and Jerome Kern, lyricists and librettists like P.G. Wodehouse, Guy Bolton, Otto Harbach and Oscar Hammerstein II, and performances by stars like Marilyn Miller, Vernon and Irene Castle, and many others.
Many of the songs were composed on Tin Pan Alley, which was West 28th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenue in Manhattan.
The term Tin Pan Alley may have come from the sound of many pianos, resembling the banging of tin pans. After many years, the term came to refer to the U.S. music industry in general.
From time to time efforts were made to break loose from the bonds of the rigid formula, especially due to the efforts of Jerome Kern.
Jerome Kern is one of America's great composers of popular song. But he is much more than that. He is responsible for marking a turning point in the history of the American musical theater.
When Jerome Kern started writing and plugging his songs at the turn of the century, the majority of American theater music was strongly influenced by the European, or Viennese style. Victor Herbert was the master of this kind of writing.
However, after Kern's Showboat, the Broadway musical was changed forever.
Jerome David Kern was born January 27, 1885, in New York City.
Throughout his career, Jerome Kern composed nearly 700 songs for 117 musical shows and films between 1905 and 1945. It was, however, more than just the number of songs or the number of shows that was important. It was his influence on the whole nature of the American musical theater.
His parents named him Jerome because they lived near Jerome Park, a favorite place of theirs. Jerome Park was named after Leonard Jerome, who was the father of Jenny Jerome, mother of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
Kern studied at the New York College of Music, and then in Heidelberg, Germany.
When he came back to New York in 1905, he started working as a rehearsal pianist and then as a Tin Pan Alley song plugger. He wrote new numbers for revivals of European operettas.
It didn't take long for him to become a prominent and renowned composer in 1912. He produced The Red Petticoat, the first musical comedy containing only his own music.
The Princess Theater opened in 1912. It was a small theater with only a few hundred seats. As a result of the small stage size and limited seating, it could not accommodate and generate enough revenue to put on a revue or operetta.
Instead, it was decided to put on a small-scale musical in which the book or plot would be the most important element, and with much less emphasis on an extravagant stage production that was in vogue at the time, such as the Ziegfeld Follies.
In the 1920s, the Princess Theater shows, with texts by Guy Bolton, lyrics by P.G. Wodehouse, and music by Jerome Kern, represented for the times a radical departure from the kind of musicals then popular on Broadway.
The Princess Theater shows concentrated on intimate and informal entertainment with small casts and no stars.
In place of production numbers, humorous skits and chorus girl lines, these musicals concentrated on sophistication, witty dialogue, amusing incidents that rose naturally from the context of the play, charming music, and a distinctly American personality of plot and characters.
The first show of the Bolton, Wodehouse and Kern team was Nobody Home, which was a substantial success. The next effort was an even greater success in 1915.
By this time, the songs of Jerome Kern appeared in as many as 7 or 8 Broadway shows a season.
Kern then wrote for Oh Boy! In 1917. This show ran for 463 performances at the Princess Theater.
A major step forward in Kern's career was the score for the show Sally, in 1920. This show was presented at the larger New Amsterdam Theater.
That represented a step forward in Kern's writing, which incorporated much of the new dance music of the time. That show gave us Marilyn Miller singing Look for the Silver Lining, a perfect example of Kern's melodic purity. This show was the basis of a movie of the same name. We will now see a video clip of the song, Look for the Silver Lining from the movie, Sally, released in 1929.
To view this video, select number 21 from the Broadway 1 playlist.
Kern joined Oscar Hammerstein II in 1925, with whom he would have a lifelong friendship and collaboration.
Oscar Hammerstein II was born in New York City in 1895. He attended Columbia University Law School and served as an apprentice in a law firm.
After only a year in law school and the law firm, his love for show business caused him to quit both.
Hammerstein became involved in every aspect of show business, including management, production, and writing.
He soon realized that the most important element of a successful theatrical production is a quality plot.
He then turned his efforts to writing both dialogue and lyrics, and that became his chief focus for the rest of his life.
He had great success with his partnership with Jerome Kern, and later with Richard Rodgers.
In 1927, Kern teamed up with lyricists Otto Harbach and Oscar Hammerstein for the show, Sunny. That show included the hit song Who. This early collaboration with Hammerstein was to lead to a lifelong friendship and professional relationship that resulted in the best-known Kern score, Showboat, in 1927.
The greatest revolution in the American musical theater came in 1927, with Showboat, by Oscar Hammerstein II, and Jerome Kern. Showboat is a remarkable achievement, and marked a major change in the way musicals were presented.
Oscar Hammerstein The second wrote the lyrics, and Jerome Kern composed the music for Showboat.
Showboat represented a completely new genre. The musical play is distinguished from musical comedy. Now, the play was the thing, and everything else was subservient to it.
Now, at last, came complete integration of song, humor and production numbers into a single and inextricable artistic entity.
Finally, there was a musical with a consistent and credible storyline, authentic atmosphere, and three-dimensional characters.
Showboat represented a completely new type of a musical play as distinguished from musical comedy. Now, the play was the thing, and everything else was subservient to that.
Prior to Showboat, most musicals were more of a musical review of assorted songs and dance numbers with very little of a storyline. Showboat changed all of that.
The Broadway show opened at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York in 1927, where it ran for a year and a half.
Showboat was adapted from Edna Ferber's novel of the same name. Movie versions of Showboat came out in 1929.
1936.
And 1951.
Of the 8 songs in the show, 6 have become all-time standards, and 3 film versions of the show have been made.
We will now see a video clip of the Showboat title sequence.
To view this video, select number 1 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
We will now see the preview or trailer for Showboat.
To view this video, select number 2 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
Showboat is based on a 1926 novel of the same name by Edna Ferber. It chronicles the lives of 3 generations of performers on the Cotton Blossom, a floating theater that travels between small towns on the banks of the Mississippi River. From the 1880s to the 1920s.
This is a postage stamp honoring Edna Ferber.
Songs in Showboat have become associated with unforgettable stars like Helen Morgan, Irene Dunne, Howard Keel, Lena Horne, and Paul Robeson, who will always be identified with Old Man River.
We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Why Do I Love You?
To view this video, select number 3 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Can't Help Lovin' It Man of Mine.
To view this video, select number 4 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Old Man River.
To view this video, select number 5 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, After the Ball Is Over.
To view this video, select number 6 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
Prior to Showboat, most musicals were more of a musical review of assorted songs and dance numbers, with very little of a storyline.
However, Showboat was a hit thanks to the brilliance of the music, the literacy and humanity of its book and lyrics, and even more so, due to the tight integration of the story and the musical numbers. This is the American Queen steamboat, which currently has cruises on the Mississippi River from New Orleans to Memphis and Memphis to St. Louis, and then on to the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Showboat was the earliest U.S. musical play with a serious plot drawn from a literary source. The show was a turning point in musical theater.
Jerome Kern had further success with The Cat and the Fiddle in 1931. And Music in the Air in 1932 and 1933. Kern wrote the score for the Broadway musical, Roberta.
Roberta featured the hit song, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
In 1933, Kern went to Hollywood to work on the filming of the Broadway show. From this time on, he devoted himself to the film musical, although he did return to Broadway every so often.
His last Broadway show in 1939, Very Warm for May, was a dismal flop due to the inferior book.
However, it had a fine musical score which included the Kern Hammerstein classic song, All the Things You Are,
in Hollywood. However, Kern remained very successful.
Kern collaborated with talents like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and lyricists Otto Harbach and Dorothy Fields, to produce some of his most haunting and memorable songs.
For Swing Time, starring Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, he wrote The Way You Look Tonight.
The Way You Look Tonight had lyrics by Dorothy Fields. It won the Academy Award in 1936 for the Best Song.
The 1952 movie, Lovely to Look At, featured music by Jerome Kern.
In 1941, Kern and Hammerstein teamed up to write a song for a city which had just been occupied by Nazi Germany. That song, The Last Time I Saw Paris, was featured in a movie of the same name with Elizabeth Taylor, and won an Oscar for Best Song.
We will now have a video with the song, The Last Time I Saw Paris.
To view this video, select number 7 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
Jerome Kern died suddenly, on a cold winter day in Manhattan, on November 11, 1945, at the age of 60. This was after a career that spanned 43 years. Jerome Kern's romance with the American musical and melody has brought us some of our finest songs. He, more than any other composer, has influenced the direction and inspired the creation of the first truly American musical theater. Oscar Hammerstein II summed it up best when he wrote of Kern, he devoted all his lifetime to giving the world something it needs, and knows it needs: beauty.
In 1946, a film biography that was loosely based on the life of Jerome Kern was released called Till the Clouds Roll By.
This is a poster for the movie Till the Clouds Roll By.
In 1914, Al Jolson became the first performer to take a Broadway show, Dancin' Around, on the road. After Dancin' Around finished its run at the Winter Garden, it was the first show to make a national tour.
Asked why he wanted to do this, Jolson's reply was, "How else can people in small towns across the country get to see a Broadway show or hear me sing?"
Chapter 19. The Big Apple.
How did the phrase, the Big Apple, come to be a nickname for New York City?
The phrase, the Big Apple, referring to New York City, was first used in a 1909 book, The Wayfarer in New York, edited by Edward S. Martin.
In a metaphor explaining the sentiment in the Midwest that the city receives more than a fair share of the nation's wealth, he explains, New York was merely one of the fruits of that great tree, whose roots go down in the Mississippi Valley, and whose branches spread from one ocean to the other. But the Big Apple, New York, gets a disproportionate share of the national sap.
To view this video, select number 8 from the Broadway 2 playlist.
Recommended videos. Recommended video, BBC Imagine 2013 Broadway Musicals, A Jewish Legacy. 1 hour, 23 minutes. Table of contents.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.